The world felt smaller every day for Ethan Cole. His once vibrant high school experience had crumbled into a daily gauntlet of taunts, shoves, and whispered rumors. It started innocuously enough. A snide comment about his thrift store shoes, a cruel joke about his wiry frame. But like a snowball rolling downhill, it gathered weight and momentum. Now it felt like there wasn't a corner of the school where he could hide. Ethan shuffled down the hallway, eyes fixed on his scuffed sneakers. Behind him, the sound of laughter grew louder, and he knew instinctively that he was the punchline. It was always the same group, Jason and his pack of self-proclaimed alpha males. Today's insult was a cruel mimicry of Ethan's stutter, something he'd tried to control for years. "Where you going, Ethan?" Jason jeered, his voice dripping with mockery. Ethan's ears burned, but he kept walking, gripping his notebook tightly. When the final bell rang, Ethan made a beeline for the exit. He loved walking home, even if it meant taking the longer route. The quiet streets were a stark contrast to the chaos of school, and he could almost pretend the world wasn't so cruel. Today, the late autumn air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of burning leaves. Ethan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, trying to shake the lingering weight of the day. He reached the park, a quiet spot nestled between rows of towering oak trees. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could sit on the worn bench by the pond and let the world melt away. As he approached, he noticed someone already sitting there, a man in a black leather jacket and dark sunglasses. He looked out of place, yet oddly at home, leaning back casually as if he had all the time in the world. Ethan hesitated. Strangers weren't common in this part of town, and his mom's voice echoed in his mind. "Always be careful, you never know who someone really is." But the man didn't seem threatening. In fact, there was something almost calming about him. "Rough day?" the man asked, his voice low and soothing. He didn't look at Ethan directly, his gaze fixed on the rippling pond. Ethan froze. He wasn't used to adults, let alone strangers, acknowledging his existence. Yeah?" he mumbled, surprised by how easily the truth slipped out. The man patted the empty spot on the bench beside him. "Take a load off. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who doesn't know your whole story." Ethan hesitated, then sat down, keeping a cautious distance. For a moment they sat in silence, the only sounds the rustling leaves and the occasional quack of a duck. Finally, Ethan found himself speaking. "In school," he said, staring at his hands. "People there don't like me." The man nodded as if he understood completely. "Kids can be cruel. Most of the time it's because they're scared. They see something different in you, something they don't understand, and instead of trying to figure it out, they make it into a target." Ethan frowned, not sure how to respond. It was the kind of thing adults said all the time, but coming from this man it didn't feel hollow. It felt real, like he knew exactly what Ethan was going through. "Do you fight back?" the man asked after a moment. Ethan shook his head. "No, I just try to stay invisible." The man turned to him then, lowering his sunglasses to reveal kind brown eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. "Let me tell you something. I know what it's like to feel invisible. But the thing about being invisible is that you see everything. You learn more than most people ever will, and one day, when the time is right, all those things you've learned, they'll make you unstoppable." Ethan stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. "You think so?" The man smiled, a crooked, knowing grin. I know so." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He didn't know who this stranger was, but something about him felt genuine, like he was someone Ethan could trust. As the man rose to leave, he clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Hang in there, kid, you're stronger than you think." Ethan watched him walk away, disappearing down the path lined with golden leaves. He hadn't even asked the man's name, but as he sat there, replaying their conversation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just met someone extraordinary. The following day, Ethan found himself replaying the conversation with the stranger. Sitting in the same classroom where Jason and his crew ruled with unchallenged arrogance, Ethan couldn't help but feel a faint ember of confidence. He had no idea why a single interaction could make such a difference, but somehow it had. Jason's latest stunt was waiting for him at lunch. They'd taken his lunch bag, emptied its contents, and written "Loser" across the front in black marker. Normally, Ethan would have crumpled it up, thrown it away, and kept his head down. But today, he didn't. "Jason," Ethan said, standing in the middle of the cafeteria, his voice louder than he expected. "Is this supposed to be funny?" The room fell silent. Jason, caught off guard, paused mid-laugh. "What did you say, stutter boy?" Ethan's hands trembled, but he stood his ground. "I said, is this supposed to be funny, or are you just bored because you don't have a personality?" The cafeteria erupted into murmurs and suppressed laughter. Jason's face turned a bright shade of red, and for a split second, Ethan saw something he'd never seen before: hesitation. Jason wasn't used to being called out. His armor of bravado had a crack, even if it was fleeting. "Watch your mouth, Cole," Jason growled, shoving past him. "You're not worth my time." Ethan sat down at an empty table, his heart pounding like a drum. He'd done it. Stood up to Jason. Maybe it wasn't much, but for Ethan it felt like scaling a mountain. For the rest of the day, people looked at him differently. No one said anything directly, but there were fewer smirks, fewer sidelong glances. He wasn't invisible anymore. After school, Ethan headed back to the park. He wasn't sure if the stranger would be there again, but part of him hoped. As he approached the bench by the pond, his heart skipped a beat. There he was, the man in the leather jacket, sitting casually as if he'd been waiting all along. "You came back," the man said without turning around. His voice carried the same calm warmth as before. Ethan sat down beside him. I stood up to someone today." The man tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Good for you. How did it feel?" "Terrifying," Ethan admitted, "but also kind of amazing." "That's how courage works," the man said. "It doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you don't let the fear stop you." Ethan nodded, letting the words sink in. After a moment, curiosity got the better of him. "Who are you, anyway? You're not from around here." The man chuckled. "You could say I travel a lot." Ethan frowned. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" The man leaned back, gazing at the clouds. "Let's just say I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel small, like the world is against you. But I also know it gets better. You just have to keep going, no matter how hard it gets." Ethan didn't press further. Whoever this guy was, he had a way of making everything feel less heavy. They sat in companionable silence, watching the ducks glide across the pond. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the man stood. "Take care, Ethan," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Remember, you're stronger than you think." Ethan looked up, startled. "Wait, how do you know my name?" The man smiled, enigmatic as ever. "See you around." And with that, he walked away, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself drawing on the stranger's words more and more. The cracks in Jason's facade grew wider, and while the bullying didn't stop entirely, it no longer felt insurmountable. Ethan's confidence began to build, little by little. He even started speaking up in class, something he hadn't done in years. But the stranger remained a mystery. Ethan returned to the park every day after school, hoping to see him again. Each time, the bench was empty. It wasn't until nearly a month later that he found the man there again, casually flipping through a book. "Hey," Ethan called, his voice filled with excitement. The man looked up, smiling. "Hey, yourself." "Where have you been?" Ethan asked, plopping down beside him. "Here and there," the man said cryptically. "But I see you've been doing well. How's school?" Ethan grinned. "Better, still rough, but I'm handling it." Good, the man said, nodding approvingly. Told you you were stronger than you thought. Ethan studied him for a moment. There was something so familiar about him, something he couldn't quite place. Finally, he blurted out, "Why do you care?" "About me, I mean." The man chuckled. "Let's just say I've got a soft spot for underdogs." Before Ethan could press further, a jogger passing by slowed down, staring at the man. "Hey, are you Keanu Reeves?" Ethan's jaw dropped as the man, Keanu Reeves, lowered his sunglasses and gave a small, sheepish smile. Ethan's mouth hung open, his mind scrambling to process what he'd just heard. The stranger, no, Keanu Reeves, was sitting beside him, smiling as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "Wait, what?" Ethan stammered, his thoughts colliding. "You're Keanu Reeves." Keanu shrugged, his expression both amused and apologetic. "Guilty as charged." The jogger, clearly starstruck, fumbled with her phone. "Oh my God, can I get a picture?" Keanu held up a hand, his tone polite but firm. "Not right now. Maybe another time." The jogger nodded, wide-eyed, and jogged off, throwing one last glance over her shoulder. Ethan sat frozen, his mind racing through every interaction they'd had. It all made sense now. The wisdom, the confidence, the sense of familiarity. But the realization also brought a wave of disbelief. Why would someone like Keanu Reeves care about him? Ethan shook his head, trying to gather his thoughts. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Keanu leaned back on the bench, his expression thoughtful. "Because it didn't matter. You didn't need a celebrity. You needed someone to listen, someone to remind you how strong you are." "But you're Keanu Reeves," Ethan repeated, as if saying it again would make it more real. "You could have." "Done what?" "Fixed everything for you," Keanu interrupted gently. "That's not how it works, Ethan. You're the one who stood up to your bullies. You're the one who started finding your voice. All I did was nudge you in the right direction." Ethan's eyes stung and he blinked quickly, not wanting to cry in front of John Wick. "But why me? Out of everyone you could have helped." Keanu smiled, a soft, almost bittersweet expression. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone, to feel like the world's against you, and I've seen what happens when someone finds the strength to push through. I saw that in you, Ethan. You just needed a reminder of what you're capable of." Ethan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. He thought back to all the times he'd wanted to give up, all the times he'd felt like he didn't matter, and here, sitting beside him, was someone who not only believed in him, but had taken the time to show it. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Don't thank me. Just keep being brave. And when things get tough, remember, you're not invisible. You matter." Ethan nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest that he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he believed those words. He mattered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Keanu stood. "I should get going, but don't worry, I'll be around." Ethan stood too, unable to stop himself from asking, "Will I see you again?" Keanu grinned. "Who knows? The world's a small place, but I have a feeling you'll be just fine." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the path like he had so many times before. But this time Ethan didn't feel sad or abandoned. He felt hopeful. He felt strong. The next day at school, Ethan walked through the halls with his head held high. Jason and his crew still loitered by the lockers, but for once their jeers didn't faze him. He'd faced worse than them, and survived. As he walked home, the wind carried a faint echo of Keanu's parting words, "You're stronger than you think." Ethan smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time in a long time, he believed it.